rod and ball forms of the fingers using the simple ball, knuckle, and rod, shank, forms we have studied earlier. Note that the three rods, shanks, of the index finger appear quite long in this three-quarter view. We see the other fingers more straight on. As we move progressively to the left, the rods or bone shanks are seen as shortest, especially the rear shank, on the fourth finger. This is due to a foreshortening or compression of frontal space. One of the ways to test the accuracy of the drawings of foreshortened fingers is to check the fingernail length seen in depth against the curves in the different views from side to front as shown in the middle diagrams. Beginning with the side view at right, the nail appears more sidewise than frontal. It seems long from front to back. Note arrows, and the curve is quite elliptical. In the schematic block in front of the nail, the circle is seen as an ellipse because of the tangential view, and the top of the ellipse has the same kind of curve as the nail arch. The nail of the long middle finger is more circular because its tip is seen more to the front. It is also shorter from front to back, and the nail is less elliptical and more curved, as shown by the schematic block. The fourth finger is seen from the deepest view of all, its tip seen at almost full circle with the nail fully arched. Conversely, the nail length is also the shortest of all because of the deepest foreshortening. Note the full circle on the schematic block. The little finger is veering left of center, and the slight side view gives it somewhat elliptical nail arch at front. The two sketches at bottom show the knuckle and shank forms in the terminals of the middle and fourth fingers. Compare the front view of the fourth finger with the tangential view of the middle finger. The fourth finger looks short and circular, while the middle finger looks long and elliptical. Also note how the fingertips and nails reflect the views of the fingers. Foreshortening in rotation. The drawing here is a wonderful exercise in foreshortening, using just the single long middle finger. The finger is seen in rotation in two directions, on a horizontal plane from side to side and on a vertical plane from top to bottom. The rotation scheme is given in miniature in the diagram at upper left. On the horizontal axis, the shorter the radius, the deeper the foreshortened view of the finger, producing shorter finger shank lengths but rounder nails and knuckles. The concept here is that cylindrical forms become circular in foreshortening. This is also true for fingers in vertical rotation. As before, any new finger in the downward progression becomes more circular as foreshortening occurs, and with the increase of spatial depth, the overlapping of curved elements also increases. It will be profitable to study slowly each of the phases on both planes shown here. Tonal changes to achieve depth. The use of tonal or value changes is an indispensable factor in the development of spatial recession. The drawing at lower left, showing top, side, and underplane surfaces at the two fingers, reveals that advancing surfaces seen horizontally are defined with light tones, receding surfaces which fall away to side planes are given intermediate tones, and regressing forms, such as underplanes, which lie farthest from the light, are expressed in deepest values. The tonal or value system shown in the sketch is simplified in order to permit the use of accented dark contours on undersurface areas. The developed drawing in the center shows a sequence of a single bent finger moving in an arc of foreshortened changes. The advancing plane here is the middle phalanx of each finger. Thus the top surface is generally lightest. The intermediate surfaces are found mainly on side planes and small protrusions, and are defined with grayish tones. The surfaces lying deepest are toned at darkest. In the upper sequence, the single finger is twinned around, with the fleshy palmar surface exposed to the light source. This finger is seen in various positions of the rotational swing, thus the terminal phalanx may show lighter or darker values, depending on the advancing, receding, or regressing spatial direction. Overlapping, interlacing, and spiraling overlapping of forms is an essential aspect of foreshortening. Depending on the view from which they are seen, a near form cuts in front of or overlaps the one behind, the second overlaps the third, and so on, like beads on a string. Most overlapping hand forms are curved, knuckles, muscle mounds, fleshy finger pads. These curves are linked by lines formed by narrow finger shanks, tendons coursing down the fingers, surface skin covering, interphalangeal webs, and skin wrinkles, which tend to occur at the hollows and depressions of the hand. In the drawings shown here, the combination of these two forms creates a spiraling effect, particularly in foreshortened views. Note the sinuous, rhythmic pattern of knuckle mounds linked by bone shanks, skin sheaths, and creases. Also note the accented areas of mounds and protrusions, and the lines running lengthwise through the spiraling volumes of forms. Details of form interlacing are shown here on the 3 schematics alongside the completed hand. In both upper and middle schematics, the interlace arrows move along tendons and skin stresses. Note how the forms on the hand at right blend into an uninterrupted continuity. The lower schematic shows sharply defined edges and planes along the interlacing and spiraling arrows. Variation in values is used on the finished hand to achieve depth. Note the darker tones on the palm seen in deeper space as well as the cast shadows, which indicate overlapping forms, not connecting ones. Visual tension depth increases visual tension and impact when fingers contrapose each other, especially in overlapping. In this drawing, index finger and thumb are thrust left and out. Note direction of arrows, while the rear fingers, less tense and darker, bend inward for contrast. The arm is also part of this leftward, energized thrust. Note how solid the near forms appear and how recessive the ones farther back seem. Opposition and overlapping. This drawing shows overlapping and opposition, with changing thumb and little finger positions. Note how the contrast is heightened and depth increased with the change of position, and that when the thumb and little fingers are extended, the depth of the middle finger is unclear. When the thumb and little finger overlap across the palm, we can actually see space between thumb, palm, and middle finger. The raised and bent little finger is 3 or more inches from the base of all the other fingers and casts a shadow on the palm. This combination of shadows and opposition is a powerful device for creating depth. Contraposed fingers. This is another example of contraposed fingers moving in 3 contrary directions. The thumb and ring fingers in opposition to each other. See broken arrows compress in tight contact, the ring finger underneath and bent into the palm, the thumb and top. Cast shadows, overlapping, and varying tones all help to illustrate depth. The 2 fingers extended outward in right and the little finger bent tautly inward and left express a diametrical cross-palm overlap. The extreme divergence excites the eye with its tension, yet also note the recession of knuckles in a much less tense visual sequence. Summary view. This rear view of the arm and hand expresses various devices of foreshortening and contraposition. Continual contrapositional changes in direction are apparent throughout. Note the long, elevated arm, then a descent of the palm back toward the inner arm, with a sharp drop of the thumb. Thumb knuckles fall steeply at right angles to palm knuckles, while finger knuckles rise high and quickly reverse direction downward and inward at right angles. On the deep underpalm, 2 fingers move forward somewhat tentatively in marked contrast to the top thumb. This drawing also exhibits overlapping and shows the interlacing lines and barreling spiral forms described in previous drawings. Note how tonal changes, shadows, and contour accents all help to illustrate deep spatial recession. Expansion and compression. Expansion and compression of elements increase the illusion of spatial recession. This is especially important in views that need clarification, as when thick, fleshy forms join in soft mounds on the underside of the fingers. In the toned thumb forms at the top, the inward and outward paired arrows show how the drawing was conceived on the principle of expansion and compression. The alternating rhythms create opposition and pictorial dramatics. The compressed passages are fused into forms such as narrow tendons or creases. If these are not apparent, then arbitrary compressions can be expressed as skin tensions. If these make sense visually, and if the foreshortening works without confusion of advancement and recession, the devices of expansion and compression can be relied upon in virtually every foreshortening solution. For example, note in the 2 lower left drawings how the alternating paired arrows define both bony forms and fleshy forms. This sketch, without explanatory arrows, shows a series of expanding and compressing fingertip forms. As you study the drawing, decide whether it works visually or not. Tonal changes and cast shadows enhance recession and depth, but note how arbitrary these are. The logic of a known light source and correctly worked out light and shadows is not as important as the necessity of using whatever means work to achieve visual clarity of forms in space. Inventing hands in action. The best hand actions are not necessarily copied exactly from life. Pictorial logic, design necessity, and the overall concept of the work impose their own demands. Anyone who has seen the interpretive and expressive responses of Leonardo, Michelangelo, Grunewald, or Rodin, will understand the need of the artist to create form in response to his intuitive impulses. A starting point for drawing an original and personal hand in action is to sketch, perhaps even copy, a prosaic view of one of the hand's numerous gestures. It does not have to show a remarkable attitude or even a near relationship to the expected result. It can be only a starting point from which you can develop your own personal vision. Outside and thumb side palm in the upper sketch. Note how a simple movement of the index finger upward and downward can convey a sense of excitement and different shades of meaning. Changes in the position of the little finger add further emotional inflections to the movement. In the lower drawing, each finger change alters the meaning of the gesture. Study these drawings and experiment with changing emotional connotations by moving the drawings into different positions. Parallel projection. The parallel projection method is a useful device for visualizing possible new hand views. Start with a simple sketch of some easily worked out actions such as the side view with extended fingers shown here. Then set out a few horizontal track lines extending from major forms. In this case, thumb and palm muscle thickness and index and little finger lengths are being tracked. These choices are purely arbitrary and only serve to identify change of direction and form. If you need more than these in a sketch of your own, don't hesitate to put them in. Frontal parallel projection with tracks laid out. Sketch an attentive deep frontal view of a hand, holding the forms to the limits of the extended lines. If they confuse the eye, sketch them in erasable colored pencils or label each line with the form's name. When you have put in your first forms, you will see a new frontal view of the hand emerge. If doubts arise, project new parallels of smaller forms, or if certain forms inhibit you or need to be changed, then change them. The drawing is your own and it's up to you to decide what to do with it. Reversing positions. You can now do a surprising thing. You can develop the drawing of frontal foreshortening just discussed into its reversed position. First, trace or copy closely the outline of the front view as shown at upper left. Note that the forearm now inserts itself into the dorsal side of the hand. This deliberately causes the eye to accept a shift in the spatial field from front to rear. Now decisively insert the contours of the palm knuckle bulges. In the drawing at right, note the accented knuckle forms, the well-defined wrist curve, the ulnar head 98 joining the outside arm, and the line of the radial bone on the inside arm moving toward the index finger. The third step is to insert finger knuckles. These are found on the outline of the little finger and the ring finger in the sketch at left. This can be done with a simple set of arcs, with fingernails inserted. Then other fingers can easily be put in place. Tones are casually defined to show recession, and the drawing can be totally refined. At this point, go back to the side view hand in the previous drawing and review this sequence. Multiple sequence changes. The right hand frontal view shown here expresses several frontal overlap movements. Note the index finger pointing outward, then shifting the middle shank inward and the last shank down toward the palm. The middle and ring fingers decidedly overlap the palm when bent forward. When experimenting with these sequence changes, don't hesitate to draw through existing forms. The palm or thumb may be beautifully done, but may be obstacles to better drawing. Therefore, go through, make changes. The changes here are only a start. Get tracing paper and pencil and lay the paper on the sketch and start new finger positions. Train your eye to see new possibilities. A rear view of the inside arm, palm surface, and fingers tends to present problems and accurate finger lengths when the finger root cannot be seen. In this drawing, the clue is in the index finger. The palm knuckle of the top side of the hand is clearly apparent. In the two faces shown here, each accounts for two finger actions. If we draw an arc from the knuckle and see their position through to the little finger, we can determine the knuckle origin of all the other fingers. From these projected points, new fingers may begin, overlapped visually by the knuckle pads on the palm surface. If the hands were reversed and drawn from a rear view, as done previously, finger lengths could also be deduced from the index finger and carried into the rear series. Try looking at each finger crease as if it were within an arc connected to the other fingers. Then note fingertip relationships. The forms in space can be worked carefully, section by section. The finger variations here are modest ones. More dramatic ones can be tried by using tracing paper for a new sequence. Try tuning this page around and looking at the drawing from a different view. Then reorder the finger positions, exploring new positions and feeling tones. Multiple fingers. Front view. This sketch shows a front multiple finger view of the hand and the receding arm. The fingers are both extended and partially closed. It is a rather complex treatment of the problem of discovering new finger positions and examining total hand actions. The little finger is shown in three phases, the thumb in 4, and the other fingers in 2. Most aspects are developed transparently, which helps in making judgments about placement and measurement. It is important to train your imagination with multiple views as shown here, and it will be useful for you to come back to this chapter at a later time for further ideas and refinement. 8. The hand is an instrument. While most anatomical structures tend to serve discrete and specialized ends, the hand, because of its plasticity, is designed to serve a wide range of needs. In a certain position, with only slight shifts in tension or direction, it can be used for very different purposes and can even express very different meanings. You will see this subtle shift in use and meaning in the drawings in this chapter, after you have explored the various ways the hand can function as a tool or an instrument as shown here. Go on to other exercises of your own and explore new possibilities of the hands as an instrument. Open palm. The simple position of palm open, with fingers taut and extended, is one in which the hand can function in a number of actions, depending on the energy, strength, or tension used. If the hand is brought down in side position, as shown in the upper drawing, driving the force against the little finger side, it acts as a chopper. When palm is front, as in the lower drawing, the hand becomes a slapping or batting instrument, as in a handball game. If the same position is turned palm upward, the hand becomes a spatula or a wedge to pry something open with extended fingers. And if the palm is rotated downward, it can pat gently or spank with force. If the wrist tension is eased, the palm can wave back and forth like a fan. Single finger extensions. 2 examples of the hand shown with fingers closed and only the index finger extended convey different meanings depending on attitude and projection. In the top sketch, if the finger points downward on some yielding surface, then briskly comes in a twisting motion, the hand becomes an awl or an auger. If the hand is still, fingertip slowly tapped, it signifies decision or command. The hand in the bottom drawing, finger projected outward, becomes a pointer. If this finger has force behind it, the jabbing gesture makes the hand into a stiletto or knife point. But slow down the motion and rotate the finger hesitatingly and repetitively toward the palm, and it becomes a probing finger, searching, palpating. The clenched fist again. Similar hands can express significant differences. With fingers closed and thumb folded on the index finger, all members tightly clenched together, the hand becomes a fist, as shown in the drawings here. But in action, different connotations appear. The up-thrusting fist at top suggests the hand is a weapon, the overarm swing at center turns the hand into a club, and the hand at bottom, fist in swift descent with strong force directed against the hypothenar cushion, becomes a mallet, hammer, or bludgeon. This configuration conveys the hands as a weapon or tool in an active, forceful state, but there are less violent actions for this form which still require force and flexion, a hand clenched or squeezing wet paper or a cloth. Can you think of alternatives? With fingers open, spread, and half flexed like claws, the versatile hand takes on the function of a rake or scraper, as in the upper sketch, or a comb or grappling hook, as shown below. Note the cramped look of the upper hand, obviously taut for dealing with stubborn grit or gravel. The somewhat open fingers below are more appropriate for running gently through the hair. Index finger hook. When the hand is virtually closed, except for the index finger arching forward and inward, the hand as a hook suggests several possible functions. The downward directed hook shown above can raise something in the crook of the finger, but this same hand held horizontally can express the signal "come ahead." The forward directed hook below also suggests a retaining hook, a buckle fastener, or a device for holding something steady and in place. Pincers and tweezers. When the thumb and forefinger meet at the fingertips, as shown in the upper drawing, the hand can perform as pincers or pliers, holding a probe, using a brush as shown, or pulling a nail. Such acts may need the support of the middle finger. However, if the function is more delicate, requiring a light touch, such as holding a pin or a needle, as shown in the lower drawing, or handling a swab in an ear or a cut, the fingers function more as tweezers. 4 fingers extended upward provide a supporting structure on which an object can rest. The little finger can be moved into this structure, or both little finger and fourth finger can be moved away, and the support will still be maintained. Try new sketches showing the support with only 3 fingers and with all 5 fingers. The hand can also act as a cup or a bowl, with fingers extended in a circle holding something, as shown from the side view in the upper drawing and from front view in the lower. This is a remarkable change from the hands as a tool, a club, a cleaver. Here the hand must respond to an object outside itself, the object actually governing the contour the hand takes on. When the arm is projected forward against the hand, which is firmly placed with fingertips braced on a table or the ground, with body weight imposed against it, the stiff fingers will be spread in a wide ellipse directed outward from the line of the arm. In this position the hand will have the effect of a supporting trestle structure. The fingertips will tend to flatten and push forward from the taut, angularly elevated hand. Note the almost inverted stress of the little finger, which seems to be near buckling under the weight put upon it. As the entire hand projects down at a sharp angle from the thrust-out arm, close-set fingers projecting down from the palm knuckles, the hand becomes a digging tool. The form here is a spatulate, flat wedge discussed at the beginning of this chapter. If the hand were to act as a spade or shovel, both the direction and the action of the hand would be reversed. To draw hands in the position of a basket or a sling requires exacting control and finger placement. Alternating elements dovetail as bony knuckles interlock with the compressed and cushioned finger shanks. This position creates a rhythmic series of undulations, with its carefully articulated rod and ball forms. Note the fingernails gradually tuning toward the underside of the basket, becoming less and less round down to the disappearing fingers. Attention to these minimal forms is as important as to the curves and shadows of the large thumbs. 2. Communication and gesture. The hand not only functions as a tool, it also communicates meaning and experience, supporting facial and bodily expression. These meanings often go beyond the level of verbal expression and are meant to be picked up by the acute swiftness of the eye. In this chapter we shall look at some typical and well-known gestures, and study how only the gestures made by the hand could communicate the meaning intended. Some gestures discussed here are cultural and cross-cultural, still carrying close to their original historical meanings, such as the concept of number, the concept of leadership and deity, and both ancient and modern sign language. Well-known gestures in the drawing at top left, the thumb and forefinger form an opening, while the three other fingers form a sequence of arcs, conveying the numbers 0 or else communicating OK. If the gesture signifies a particularly enthusiastic OK, the palm would more likely be lifted up, the fingers pointed backward, and the hand arched back confidently. After trying the gesture yourself, use tissue paper over the drawing and reset the fingers and palm in relation to the arm. The hand at bottom, with index and middle fingers upraised and thumb resting on the last two fingers, conveys number 2, but the position of the two fingers spread in a V sign and thrust skyward is also the famous victory symbol used by Winston Churchill during World War II. In the drawing at TC8, the single finger upraised means, of course, number 1, but it can also symbolize the deity, conveying respect, command, and authority. It is important to note, however, that historically this gesture has only been considered appropriate for the right hand. In many cultures the left hand has symbolized, and still does, something sinister or evil. Counting the hand with 3 fingers upraised signifies number 3, indicating the presence of 3 persons, a food order, a place or date, an umpires call, or a bid for cards. This is a special cultural form of counting, widely known but not universal. Another means of counting puts both hands to work. One hand is closed into a fist, and the opposite index finger tallies off each number as the fingers flip out of the fist, starting with the little finger as number 1. The result could be the drawing at right. If number 5 is required, the thumb would be lifted out in open position. The hand at left with 3 fingers out also carries religious connotations, signifying the powers of the divine, 3 in 1. But in formal, Orthodox Catholic usage, the finger order shown here is not appropriate. The fingers must be the first 3, starting with the thumb, not the middle 3. Open palm. The drawing here expresses number 5, all fingers extended, but this gesture can also signal a command to stop, usually done by the left hand. If the right hand were used in this gesture, it would become a sign of friendship, a salute, an expression of brotherhood, a pledge, or a gesture signifying the presence of a spiritual figure or a figure of majesty. Good luck gesture. This sketch, showing middle finger overlying index finger, expresses a moment of hope, a hedge for good luck, or a deeply superstitious fear. Emotionally toned gestures. Some hand gestures communicate very personal meanings, even though these gestures may be common to a whole culture. A common manifestation of displeasure may elicit a casual wipe of the nose with bent forefinger, as shown at right, literally a thumbing of the nose. This may be subtle, almost unnoticed, or quite overt. In any case, its meaning is pejorative. Historical meanings: success or failure. The drawings here suggest the yes or no, life or death decisions of an earlier Roman society. While these signals no longer carry the same political or moral connotations, they still suggest some of the meanings. If the thumb is thrust vigorously into the air, it suggests survival, victory, life. If it is thrust downward, it suggests extinction, failure, death. In the Roman world, the thumb was called the thumb of Hercules, suggesting virility and vitality. In our time we see the closed fist beating the chest as the Roman equivalent of affirmation, strength, and success. Impulsive and deliberative gestures. Sometimes an impulsive or spontaneous hand action is needed to convey a momentary surge of feeling. In the upper sketch, the snap of the fingers signifies a spontaneous, the drawing here is the only way the action can be worked out. There is no way to convince the eye that the action has been completed, that the two fingers have been snapped. The center sketch illustrates the ancient fig hand, thumb between index and middle fingers, conveying profound contempt and venomous insult. The monofica has also been known as a copulative gesture since biblical times and is used where extremes of feeling run high. The lower sketch depicts a didactic, deliberative ticking off of arguments in a discussion, the thumb going through a sequence of point-by-point exposition. 10. Aging. The hand changes radically from infancy to old age, not only in size, proportion, and structure, but also in skin texture, tissue structure, and surface characteristics such as hair density, pigmentation, and size, shape, and texture of fingernails. Its dexterity and capabilities, its responsiveness, its range of gestures, and the subtlety of its emotional communications also change. Studies of the developmental and aging aspects of the hand have sometimes been overlooked in anatomical works. This chapter will trace the development of the hand from infancy to old age. Infancy. The infant hand during the first weeks of life is diminutive, about the size of an adult thumb, although this varies with individuals. At birth it may be thin and wrinkled or somewhat fleshy, but the skin texture is fine and satiny. One important characteristic is that there are no protrusions such as knuckles or prominent wrist bones, which mark points at which forms are joined. Instead, the infant hand has only dimpled depressions at the finger segments and fatty rolls at the wrist, since the skeletal structure of the hand is only partially formed in the finger and metacarpal shanks. The terminals are cartilaginous material, soft and unformed, as are the wrist bones. The top sketch shows the infant hand at 6 weeks. Note that the length of the outstretched hand from wrist to tip of middle finger is about the same as that from elbow to wrist. Also note the pudgy look of the fingers and the contractions at the joints as described above. The middle and lower sketches show the infant hand at about 4 to 6 months. Already the forms are more defined, the fingers more active, the behavior more certain. This shows in the hand becoming much more open, rather than curled and closed, as in the newborn infant. Also note the emerging knuckles. Infancy to 1 year. The general character of the baby's hand does not change substantially during the first year. The forms are still squat, square, and fleshy, with little strong delineation between forms. Both dorsal and palmar sides of the hand are palpable and chubby, with dainty shell-like fingernails. Yet the hands of a 1-year-old child have begun to move with more certainty, probing, secking, feeling. The hand is the first form to project into and explore an unfamiliar world. 2 years. The two